السيارة على البلوتوث وراهم معي خليني يعني براكتس أحسن من كلمة معك بالفيسبوك ولا شغلات بعد التأديب
التاريخ انه في شيء يلتزم بالموضوع والله
حافظ القانون
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى أن رآه استغنى إن إلى ربك الرجعى أرأيت الذي ينهى عبدا إذا صلى أرأيت إن كان على الهدى أو أمر بالتقوى أرأيت إن كذب وتولى ألم يعلم بأن الله يرى كلا لئن لم ينته لنسفعا بالناصية ناصية كاذبة خاطئة فليدعو ناديه سندعو الزبانية آمنت بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم الفاتحة.
Assalamu alaikum. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, proclaim and read aloud in the name of the Lord and Cherisher, who created man out of a mere clot of thickened blood. Proclaim, and your Lord is most bountiful. He taught the use of the pen, taught man that which he did not know. Alas, man oversteps all bounds, and he considers himself as self-sufficient. Surely to your Lord is the return. Do you see the ones who forbid? A true believer when he turns to pray. Do you see if he, our servant, is on the path towards guidance or enjoins the right deeds? Do you see if he stands against the truth and turns away? Does he not know that Allah sees? Let him become aware if he does not stop. We will drag him by the hair upon his forehead, a lying sinful hair. Then let him call for help to his own group of friends. We will call the angels of punishment to deal with him. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is our 14th night of the Ramadan program. And we're going to begin, and I want to thank the two brothers. I want to thank Hajj Ali Rida and Alex Hamdan for the recitation. That was Surah Al-Alaq. And now we're going to begin the program. We have our honored guests here, Samat al-Sheikh, Dr. Ibrahim Kazaruni, with the loud salawat, please. Ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله حمدا دائما أبدا سرمدا وتبارك فردا صمدا لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا اللهم صل على سيدنا ونبينا سيد الخلق أجمعين حبيبك محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطاهرين. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a praise that has no end, and we glorify Him as the one and only who begotten, no partner and no son. O Lord, Lord bless our noble leader and messenger, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his pure progenies. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الذين يأكلون أموال اليتامى ظلما إنما يأكلون في بطونهم نارا وسيصلون سعيرا. Surely those who unjustly devour the property of the orphans do nothing but devour fire into their bellies, and soon they shall enter blazing fire themselves. Last night, as a matter of norm, we addressed a couple of issues, but we focus on one particular issue that was left for us. I'm delighted to see Brother Muhammad, that he is here. By his question a few nights ago, it was purely a theological more than practical issue. Is the possibility or a chance of prayer opened after death? This is something that we discussed. And I also stated that tonight I intend to address the orphanage, concept of orphanage from Islamic point of view, because there is huge literature about them. How should we treat them? What kind of rights they have in our society? Who is primarily responsible for them? These are few of the things. But before I proceed, there was a report recently out that underscores the crisis that we have, whether it's in our society or somewhere else, with regard to the notion of orphanage. It reads, how many orphan children do you think there are? There are a staggering number of orphans worldwide. In fact, the statistic here differs. We have minimum of 140 million and it goes above. In fact, more than 140 million children are considered orphan by one definition or the other. Sadly, even this report, the statistic, is understatement. There are orphan children who are even abandoned by the statistics. Who counts those who live in the streets where they are nowhere to be seen when you want to count? In landfills and sewers, a sewer system, in two countries around the world, Brazil and China. It was a report a few months ago that they found huge city that primarily was orphans and nothing else. A huge city under the major cities that are, when they finally managed to break through, orphan children would manage to get through these small holes between small walls and go through. So it was an undercity which was practically nothing but orphans. The same kind of thing they found in Brazil, which if we want to add these numbers, the 150 million, 200 million and so on, becomes only an optimistic statistic. Not even close to it. Where do orphan children come from? First, we can address the obvious things that we read and hear about in the news all the time. When number one, war. I remember in Iraq, the orphan children before the occupation in 2013 was estimated to be 7%. By the end of so-called 2013 and so on, when the liberators, quote unquote, left Iraq, the orphan children rate jumped to 38%. 38% of the children in Iraq were orphans. Now we have similar kind of statistics coming out of Syria, Yemen in particular, Bahrain, Afghanistan, etc., etc. So war is number one. Disease, poverty, natural disaster, abandonment, and accidents are among some of the leading causes. These can be directly associated with orphans by definition of a child who has lost one or both parents. Within and aside from the aforementioned are cultural pressures, neglect, abuse, child slavery, religious inequity, child prostitution, indentured servitude, and more. And now we are beginning to see economic policies added to the crisis as well. These are more closely associated with children without parental care that may not be a child that has lost one or more parents. They may live with a relative or neighbor or are on the street or in the jungle or subjected to one of the prior mentioned abuses. Sometimes they simply live with a blind, ill, or very old relative that loves but cannot care for them. There are many varied combinations that contribute to a child suffering without parental care, but the result are the same regardless of the cause. What do you think happens to the average orphan child? Beyond suffering and the ultimate tragedy of death, the children that do survive often do so in ways that demeans and criminalizes themselves and brings suffering to the others as well. In most countries that they have what we call orphanage crisis, the number one group in the society they are the one that they are addicted at the early age, and they become addicts, one drug or the other. The sad reality, though, is that if a good and caring person is not there to provide what they need, who is? Pimps, child labor bosses, terrorists, rebel armies with child soldiers, child traffickers, even less than good-willed relatives who want a personal slave. The end result is truly heartbreaking. As many of the orphan children out there will die of starvation and issues related to malnutrition, they will die from preventable diseases, they will die at the hand of others and themselves. They will spend much of their lives in jail, they will do harm to others and impact the world in the negative fashion. It's a crisis. And please don't think that our community is immune. We have single parents here that are suffering economic hardship, and the kids are running away from the house because they cannot tolerate. They think the world outside is much better for them. So from an Islamic, the absence, technically a working definition, absence of a father, in particular by death or abandonment, it becomes a classic example of an orphan, or any other reason resulting in a child becoming orphaned and becoming an orphan, or remaining so until the age of puberty, that then they would decide for themselves. Because of this crisis, now we have to add the life of an orphan depends on what we call north-south divide in a political definition, rich versus poor. In countries where there are social securities and there are institutions that might provide services for this, to a degree, their pain is lessened. It's not completely gone, but their pain is lessened. But in the poor countries around the world, where torn has literally ravaged through the society and broken any normal institution that existed, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and other places, we see these kids are wandering around the streets aimlessly, and they have no direction in life. There is no hope for them. There is no education. There is no medical care. There is nothing. Begging and sometimes drug abuse, etc., etc. This is, Islam understands it and looks at it as a concept of justice and dignity for these individuals. Anything, as long, I remember a few nights ago I talked about this, I touched upon it last night, and in Khutbah al-Jum'ah I stated it. Islam looks and works for the stable community. The desired community must be stable. The existence of marginalized group, whether they manifest themselves into, say, orphans, poors, needy, destitutes that have no income or no stable life, is considered to be a threat to a stable society. And it must be addressed. How do we go about addressing them? This is the fundamental issue. In the West, because of the capitalist system, they just pass it to one or two institutions, whether it is, say, the Catholic institution, the Jewish institutions, or various other social services to deal with them. The sieve, the holes in the sieve are too wide, and the orphans pass through it without anybody noticing. There are places in here, around here, that you see those who stand on the side of the road are children asking for support, not adults. How do we go about dealing with them? Certainly, when we look at the verses in the Holy Quran, we see a number of verses clearly addressing this issue head on. We have over 20 verses in the Holy Quran that focuses on the life of the orphans in very different shapes. Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Nisa, An'am, Anfal, Isra, Kahf, Duha, Balad, Fajr, and Ma'un are the ones that have direct verses in them related to the orphans. The majority of these do not address the physical need of an orphan. The majority of these focus on what we call dignity and honor of an orphan child, and encourages the believers to think that how to deal with the orphans in which we are not left with some kind of emotional and psychological scars and baggages on them that in the future would hinder their life as a normal human being working in the society. We look at the verses in the Holy Quran and Ahadith, we see this issue of the psychological, the emotional sentiment, etc., etc., must be addressed properly so they feel that they belong to a society. They don't feel that they are marginalized and an appendix to the society around them. When we look at the verses of the Holy Quran and classify them, number one, because these verses came during the Jahiliyyah time, if you look at the history of Jahiliyyah, the issue, the notion that you have to support the orphans and protect their wealth didn't exist. So it focuses primarily on the protection of their wealth. That's the number one criteria. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا مَالَ الْيَتِيمِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Why? Because a society that primarily thought they can grab wealth from anywhere, even at the expense of the orphans, this was on the top of the list to be addressed. But not at the expense of other issues. So number one, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا مَالَ الْيَتِيمِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ أَشُدَّهُ. You have to protect the orphan's wealth until he or she grows older and becomes mature, then you give it to them. فَادْفَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ أَمْوَالَهُمْ وَلَا تَأْكُلُوهَا إِسْرَافًا. Don't be dishonest when a wealth of an orphan has been given into your protection, return it to them. Don't destroy it. Don't swallow it up. وَآتُوا الْيَتَامَى أَمْوَالَهُمْ. And don't bring this wealth. Whatever belongs to an orphan, give it to them. Don't include it, somehow merge it into your own wealth. And then a clear warning. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ أَمْوَالَ الْيَتَامَى ظُلْمًا إِنَّمَا يَأْكُلُونَ فِي بُطُونِهِمْ نَارًا. Those who devour the wealth of the orphans. Why? Because they are unprotected. They have no one to stand up for them. There is no voice for them in the community. Remember that this wealth that you are swallowing it is as if, it's a metaphorical use of language, as if you are swallowing fire. It's an imminent punishment for such individuals. So this is number one. When you look at tafsirs, they say, well, they issued primarily concerned about the wealth of the orphan. No. The wealth of the orphan is been addressed in these verses in the Holy Quran because of what we call circumstantial factors. At the time, rich individuals would come and marry young girls that have become orphaned but have left with a huge amount of money, not for the sake of protecting the orphan, for the sake of taking the wealth from them. Or children, boys will be brought into the family as if they are protecting it. They have wealth, they take the wealth and then slave labor them. Because of the structure of the society, it existed on wealth. So Quran naturally has to close that door. Not allow this wealth to be abused and the wealth to turn back and be given to these individuals and orphans. Another one, naturally they need physical needs. Their physical needs have to be addressed. أو إطعام في يوم ذي مسغبة يتيما ذا مقربة. Just creating food or giving food to the needy and the poor and the orphans. فَارْزَقُوهُمْ مِنْ. When you are trying to give sadaqah or you give charity to the orphans, give it to them. But وَقُولُوا لَهُمْ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. Not in a way that they feel somehow ashamed. When you talk to them with full dignity. And then the same way that, if you remember the story of ghibah that we talked about a few weeks ago, Quran wants to create, by use of language, to create some kind of, that we feel somehow indignant to do it. And uses the metaphor of eating the dead flesh of your own brother or sister. Do you like to do it? To bring to our own attention. So we say, no, we don't want to do it. So don't do ghibah. It's a simile. When it comes to here, Quran is trying to evoke the emotion of the parents. As parents, how do you feel? Do you ever think about a day in which your children might become orphan? If you do, think about other orphans in the society as well. وَلْيَخْشَى الَّذِينَ لَوْ تَرَكُوا مِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّةً ضَعَافًا فَأَخَافُوا عَلَيْهِمْ. Let those who, when they pay attention to their own children and they think about the possibility that their children might become orphan, فَلْيَتَّقُوا اللَّهِ, then they should fear Allah. وَلْيَقُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا. When they deal with orphan, it should be with respect. Now, the same Islam does not make a distinction between your child or somebody else's. If you care for your child, then you should care for other people. ليس البر أن تولوا وجوهكم قبل المشرق والمغرب. If you think you are doing too many prayers a day, that's nothing. ولكن البر من آمن بالله وآتى المال على حبه ذوي القربى واليتامى. If you really want to submit to the command of Allah, 1,000 prayer a day or lengthy sajda, while you forget about your social responsibility to the marginalized within the community, is not going to produce anything. If you have wealth, do your religious duty, but show the blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you by giving this wealth to the needy. That, as I said, Amir al-Mu'mineen clearly stated that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allocated a portion within the wealth of the rich and the powerful. This belongs to them, it's not yours. That portion is not yours. It has to be given to the needy and the poor. ليس البر أن وآتى المال على حبه ذوي القربى واليتامى والمساكين. This is a different class or category of verses. There are some verses that directly encourage the believers to be respectful and mindful of the dignity of the orphan. Because they have lost the father doesn't mean that you should insult them. Because they are criminals, they should not insult them. They still possess that initial dignity. Remember the story that I recited a few 4 or 5 nights ago when we were talking, لَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. There is an inherent intrinsic dignity in every human being. Even the criminal has dignity that we should not violate. Somebody came to the Holy Prophet of Islam, Ya Rasulullah, I have committed an act of adultery. Punish me in this world. I don't want to be punished by Allah in the hereafter. And the Holy Prophet tried to go through the process, the legal process of establishing that yes, this has happened without shadow of a doubt. Finally, when it was established, the man is being led to be stoned. Somebody, one of these so-called zealots that they think they are holier than holy themselves, punched him on the head. The Holy Prophet immediately reprimanded him. The man has been honest and truthful to come before the law and submit himself to be punished for the crime that he has committed. It does not mean that he has lost his dignity. On what justification you hit him? So here we see a number of verses clearly encouraging the believers that you have an obligation to the aitam and orphans to be respectful to them and keep them and show them that they really have dignity in their life. أَلَمْ يَجِدْكَ يَتِيمًا فَآوَى. This is directly to the Holy Prophet. فَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمَ فَلَا تَقْهَرْ. Don't disrespect the orphan. أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ. Those who they do not respect the faith, etc., etc. فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُّ الْيَتِيمِ. These are the ones that push orphans outside the community and marginalize them, not to be around. كَلَّا بَلْ لَا تُكْرِمُونَ الْيَتِيمِ. You deserve punishment for what purpose? You deserve punishment because you don't honor the orphans. وَلَا تَحَاضُونَ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. And you don't give the poor and the needy what should be given to them. وَقُولُوا لَهُمْ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. Talk to them nicely, with dignity. In a hadith we have similar kind of things again. Man kaffala yatiman. The Holy Prophet, this is a hadith from the Holy Prophet. Whoever takes care of an orphan and pays for his or her upkeep with me, if this person is with me in the hereafter, in heaven, and the Holy Prophet put the 2 fingers together like this. We are going to be in heaven together. من أراد أن يدخله الله عز وجل في رحمته and position him in heaven. فَلْيَحْسَنْ خُلْقَهُ وَلْيَرْحَمَ الْيَتِيمِ. Gain noble character and be compassionate and merciful to the orphans. خَيْرُ بُيُوتِكُمْ, the best house that you can imagine, بَيْتٌ فِيهِ يَتِيمٌ مُكَرَّمٌ. It's a house that an orphan lives with dignity. You bring that orphan into your life, but with dignity. Again, Amir al-Mu'mineen uses this concept, أحسنوا في عقب غيركم تحفظوا في عقبكم. If you want your orphans to be protected, pay attention to the poor orphans of the others. The world goes around. You become disrespectful to the orphans of others, the time will come when your orphans will be disrespected within the society. And sometimes there is a stern warning. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will get angry for two things. Number one, إِذَا بَكَى الْيَتِيمِ اهْتَزَّ الْعَرْشِ. It's a language that normally we don't hear about it ordinarily. The whole base of Allah's power and divine power shakes. And إِذَا مُدِحَ الْفَاجِرِ اهْتَزَّ الْعَرْشِ. Once the hypocrite, the value, the moral system in the society breaks down to the point where the hypocrites are praised, but those who have honor and dignity are marginalized. وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ. No Muslim will be left on the day of judgment by himself, would not receive anything. Far from it. If a Muslim attends to the need of an orphan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not let him alone on the day of judgment. Imam Mardini a few nights ago when he was presenting alluded to the story of Khidr and Musa. To protect the wealth of an orphan or two orphans, two prophets worked for free. After the society was mean not to entertain them and not to even give them something to eat. If you read the story of Khidr, the last phase of the relationship in which Khidr told Prophet Musa, هَذَا فِرَاقٌ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَكَ, was this issue. They come to a village. They ask, well, we are guests here or strangers, can somebody give us some food or anything? They rejected them. As they were passing out, they came to a wall which was close to breaking down. So Khidr and Musa started cleaning the whole wall and building it up again. Musa became critical. And he said, well, after what we went through, you could have asked for some kind of at least payment for it, so we can spend it for a little bit of food. They have already rejected us hospitality. But then when he tells him, he said there was something under this wall for two orphan children. We are living, remember, they are living in a community that they are extremely miser and mean-spirited. If they find out that there is a wealth under this wall, they will take it and they will not give anything to the orphan children. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to build the wall so that when they grow older they can get this. This is the story of Khidr and Musa. Prophet Isa, another story from him, alayhi salatu wasalam, that says one day he was passing through the burial sites and he came to a tomb or a place where he realized through his own inner vision that the deceased in that place marhum al-allama Sheikh Muhammad Jawad Shirri. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. QA. There are plenty of stories about him. One story that stand. Well, we all know about our A'imma and Ahlul Bayt late at night going around and paying visit to the poor and the needy that lived normally on the margin of the city. So late at night they will fill up bags and go to these places and distribute them. But there is one story that stands out, from the stories that I have read. After the Battle of Siffin, there was a huge number, because the battle took a long period of time, huge number of people lost their lives from both sides. And one day, Amir al-Mu'mineen sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a habit in the afternoon would come to the market disguised, so nobody knows who he is, and try to see how people are behaving and acting. If you look at the advice that he gave to Malik Ashtar, he encouraged him to do the same thing. So as he was walking through this market, he saw a young lady carrying a water container on her back, but cursing Ali. So he came close to her and he said, Ya Amatallah, my sister, why are you cursing Ali? What Ali has done to you? He said, Ali has done nothing to me personally, but my husband was one of his soldiers and died during the Battle of Siffin, and up to now he has not come to address our problem. The story says that he followed her until they reached the house. So he went back to Baytul Mal, and whatever available was there, brought butter, bread, and dates, and this. And then comes to the house, knocks at the door. The woman comes to the door. He says, Ya Ahmatullah, I have brought little bit of food for the family. Which one do you prefer? Shall I make the bread? You look after the child, or you want me to? I look after the child, you make the bread. He said, no, my child would not settle down. I would look after the child, you make the bread. So naturally, the fire had to start. He gets close to the fire and he says, Ya Ali, taste the fire. This is the fire in this world. How on earth you can claim that you are the Amir al-Mu'mineen and Khalifa of Muslimin, and Aitam, orphan children, are not protected under your leadership? What is your justification on the Day of Judgment? And there are similar kind of other stories like this. It's a critical issue. Don't think because it's not your child or somebody else, our children around. كلكم راع and كلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. There is a reciprocal responsibility. Our imams say the same thing. Yes. Because the verse in the Quran is clear that be mindful of the punishment that normally happens because there are few people have committed sins or disobeyed Allah. But when it comes down, it does not distinguish between the good or the bad. Everyone gets it. Because we had a responsibility and we did not discharge it. We may not have wealth, but we may be able to deal with the issue in another manner. It is a critical issue. Let me answer this question and then we come back to Brother Muhammad and then see if the sisters have anything. When you tried your best to raise your children right, but when they grew up, they wandered away from their faith as parent, how do we act towards them? Well, we are responsible for the affair of our children until they reach the age of maturity. Once they understand right from wrong, bad from good, and they have the power, they understand the knowledge. Sometimes we do not bring up the children in a way that they have the power to distinguish. If we do it that way, then we are responsible for the wrong choices that they make. But if we give them all the attention that they need, all the knowledge, and ultimately they reach a point in which they exercise their free will in a negative sense. We are not responsible. وَلَا تَزِرْ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. I'm not responsible for the sin of somebody else. The person is responsible for his or her own affair. My responsibility was as a parent to provide the necessary guidance until they reach the age which they are strong enough, mature enough to understand what they are going to do. If they decide, إِنَّا هَدَيْنَاهُ السَّبِيلَ إِمَّا شَاكِرًا وَإِمَّا كَفُورًا. If they decided to disobey God, I'm not responsible for it. They are responsible for themselves. How would I structure my life under the current condition? That's something different. But as far as responsibility, no. But surely there is a responsibility if I fail to deliver my responsibility first, and then I move forward. If you could wait 1 second, sister, then come back. Brother Muhammad, you had a question.
What do we believe in? And why do we pray to?
There is an echo coming from the other side. Oh, who created the universe?
Who created the universe? And who do we believe in? And why do we pray for him?
Inshallah, that is a topic that I have to address. Probably, the concept of God and the creation, etc., etc., is not something, Brother Muhammad, that I can do it within, say, 5 minutes or even few nights. It's fundamental principle in all faith. The existence of God and the creation of the universe. Why do we pray? How should we pray? Etc., etc. Inshallah, one day we sit together and I'll explain it. Inshallah. Sister. I can't hear you, sister. Does it work?
Is there some dua or ayat in the Quran that you can recommend for a parent to say for their children if they're going astray?
Verses in the Holy Quran that reminds parents with regard to their children. Well, there are a number of verses that not only obligates children towards their parents, they obligate their parents towards their children, but you want dua in what context? Protect them.
Protect them from the evil of other people.
I don't believe, if you look at least theology, that there is recitation of Quran can protect, or recitation of dua can protect somebody from doing evil if they want to exercise their free will to be evil. There is either we believe that Allah subhanahu we are micromanaged, which means there is a predestined kind of things, or we say that we have free will. If we have free will, then we have the right to exercise that free will. Now, if my child, that I have done everything to guide him or her, decides that at the age of, say, 20, whatever, they want to go non-linear, and they, subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's their exercise of their will. I cannot simply recite Surah Al-Fatiha and somehow miraculously change it. To give you an example, Surah Nuh, the story of Prophet Nuh. At the moment when the flood comes, there is a conflict and a challenge between him and his son. And he's a prophet. He could have asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, look, change him around 180 degrees and become a follower of my faith. No, everyone is responsible for their own deed. It's not our responsibility to try to manipulate things, and I don't believe there is any dua that miraculously is going to change the son or the daughter if they are intentionally want to disobey. We can provide them with information and at the same time ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide them. but we cannot force them into one direction or the other if they don't wish to follow it. Yes. It depends. It depends how you want. If there is hope, you have to continue with them for a while until you establish that there is no hope. If you establish that there is no hope, lakum dinukum waliya din. No, I'm just saying you have to establish. Certainly, love, compassion, and mercy as a medium of communication has an effect. But if the child insists that he or she wants to be drug user, alcoholic, or whatever, no matter how hard you try, there will be a time, say, okay, I have done my best, then you separate yourself from them. That's a choice that one has to make at the end of the day. But certainly we cannot just give up immediately. We should try the love, respect, noble ethics, etc., to deal with them, in the hope of guiding them to come back to the right path. But if they adamantly refuse, this is our life, take it or leave it. Well, you try to stay away from them for a while and let's see. They may find it difficult and understand that this path is not leading them anywhere, and they come back or they initiate some kind of contact again. But it's a choice that an individual makes rather than to come up with a policy that everyone has to follow. هل منع مال الخمس هو أكل حق اليتيم? Don't know what the question is. Khums, if the question is whether there is in khums there is some kind of portion for the orphans, yes. Khums is divided into two sections, what we call Sahm al-Imam and Sahm al-Sadat. Sahm al-Imam is for public project, which includes paying attention to the orphanage, to the poor, the needy, etc., So will be spent by the marja or the scholars or whoever one follows as part of it goes for this project. Any other? Sorry, sister. The debate about how sinful individuals are being punished and what we call various designation or levels in punishment, it's a complicated conversation. There is a verse in the Holy Quran that says, وَإِن مِّنكُمْ إِلَّا وَارِدُهَا. Everyone literally has to pass through this phase of entering fire and getting out of it. The problem is how quickly you come out of it depends on one's action. For people who have not done well in their lives, they have to go through this process and stay there in it. There are certain sins that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, or within our literature, clearly identified as unforgivable. Shirk is one of them. Now we have to argue as to exactly what shirk means. But let's assume that there are certain sins that are unforgivable. So these people who commit these sins that are going to go into this place, wherever we call them, the debate is whether they are going to stay there forever or they are coming out. Part of the discussion that we had last night regarding what Brother Muhammad had asked centers on this, what we call perfection after death. There are a school of thought that says the moment that the jasad or the body comes back for the soul to enter it, even in the hereafter, stages of perfection opened up, but in a different context. Even a person that is in fire has to go through it. So there are some individuals that they are going to be punished eternally, because there are verses in the Holy Quran constantly said, "Hum fiha khalidun." Khulud means eternally they are going to stay there. But there are others that their sins certainly deserves punishment. Our literature doesn't indicate that they are going to be permanently punished, so they will come out of it. The length of stay is in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we don't know how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to judge. There is a hadith that says, don't underestimate even the smallest sin that you commit, because you are not the judge, somebody else is the judge, and we don't know what criteria the judge uses to make a judgment. So on the day of judgment, certainly we have to go, because we are sinful, we have to go through it. And by the way, the debate between Paul and Peter in Christianity regarding this eternal damnation is one of those classic examples of whether this concept exists as called eternal damnation or not. There are those who appeal to the what we call the basic love or eternal love, and we have in our literature a concept of Rahman and Rahim, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy would not permit everyone to stay in punishment or in that state forever. But certainly we have a hadith that clearly indicates, in the same way that in heaven we have layers and different categories or different group of people or classes, the same manner we have it in heaven. What does that mean exactly? We don't know. Does it mean that their punishment is stronger than other people? It might be. Does it mean that this is like a pit, that the depth of fire is on the bottom and they are going to be sent down there where fire is severe? Possible. There are various, as I said, narratives or language being used to explain it. But all of these are use of language to bring a very difficult concept to comprehend to our own mindset. When we talk about Jahannam, hell, exactly what is it? The language talks about fire, punishment, etc., etc. Or a place in which there are things torturous and so on that we see. To conjure that idea and bring it closer. But is it that? The mystics have a totally different understanding of this. They say closeness to the beloved and being far away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is heaven and hell. That's a different understanding of heaven and hell. But certainly we have different layers and we have different categories, different positions, and people are being tortured or rewarded differently. We don't know until the time comes, inshallah. Sisters, any papers, anything? Sister. Well, this was, the question was, most of the ulama were asked about this question, whether it is permissible or not. There surely is a fundamental principle that touching a stranger is a sin, under any circumstance. Now, living in the West brings in other parameters into the conversation that under normal circumstances is not there. If I go for an interview and the person who is interviewing me is a female, and by default she extends her hand to shake hand. Here is what the scholars have talked about. They say You are the one who has to make a choice. If you think that by not shaking hand you are going to be harmed by it, then the principle of harm makes an exception and it's allowed. If it's only a mere discomfort, there is no harm. Nothing is going, no what we call negative consequences, but mere discomfort that you have to explain yourself, then that's not a justifiable reason for shaking hand. Yes, the concept of harm is the one that dictates. If there is a possibility of you losing your job, or the person saying, well, this person is not suitable for the job because of the attitude, etc., or because of the inherent Islamophobia, this adds to it. You have to make instantaneous decision. What is this context telling you? Is there a possibility of harm out of this refusal to shake hand? If there is, then it is permissible under la darara wa la darara fil Islam. This is a principle. If no, it's only, well, if I don't shake hand, I have to put myself into the discomfort of explaining to the other side why I'm not shaking my hand. That's not enough justification for shaking hand. And it's, by the way, most people, most scholars talk about this. So. Last night I was asked the same, I think it was last night, the night before I was asked the same thing. Where should we start? It's prioritization. You have to start from the nearest place to you before you go somewhere else. I will be obligated to stand up against Saddam if I was living in Iraq. I can deal with Saddam in another way because I'm living here. There are certainly orphanages in Iraq and other places, and there are poor people living here. So where should we send our money? First, we should remove the need that exists around us before we go somewhere else. That's the prioritization. If you can do both at the same time, do it. But if we have limited access to, say, resources, financial or otherwise, then the one around you is better than going somewhere else. I know you have to go. I know you have to go, I think.
Is that meaning it's up to the situation or up to the place? Because I sent to Syria now because people burning there.
Yes.
Here, the people, I know they need, but it's not as much in Iraq or Syria.
Yeah, that's one. Once we have to understand the way we prioritize. Is it on equal level? Then the priority stays here. But if there are worse situations, the presence of social services and other supports from the government at least provides something. The poor within what we call north-south divide, the poor in the West. I remember an African person was saying, we aspire to become the poor in the West because of the desperate situation that we are in now. So what we do, we send it where more need exists, if there is at least a degree of support here for them. Institutions, there are some institutions that are operational in certain parts of the world, but in other places that they are not. The mere crisis in Syria, Iraq, simply has not left space for any institution to properly work beyond touching what we call scratching the surface. So we need to do that. But at the same time, as a matter of rule, we start with around our own family or within our own society first. Sisters, I'm still waiting for Yeah, I'm worried about this month coming to an end and nothing coming from this side. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum. Just want to thank our beloved Imam Gazaruni for enlightening us tonight. We're truly lucky to have him at the ICA. And I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you for coming. Inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow, 8 o'clock.